Hey, so the October 14th Complete Streets Commission is called to order. This is a teleconference meeting with the Complete Streets Commission members, city staff, and members of the public participating remotely to ensure proper social distancing in this federal, state, and local emergency. Now moving on to agenda item B, which is a roll call vote. I would like to introduce Complete Streets Commission members and staff who are present. I'm the chair, Dina Levin, and the commissioners present include Katie Baruzzi, Jackie Sebrian, John Cromie, Patricia Espinosa, Phil Kirsch, Lydia Lee Meyer, Isaac Wyatt, and staff present include, am I looking at the wrong version? It says Kevin Chen and Patrick Palmer and Nicole Nagaya. Patrick, will you please provide instructions to the Complete Streets Commission and members of the public on how the meeting will proceed?
Yes, thank you, Chair Levin, and members of the Complete Streets Commission. I'd like to welcome everyone to the October 14th meeting of the Complete Streets Commission, and thank you for attending. At this time, we will ask that the members of the Commission to please remain on screen for the duration of the meeting. You will control your own webcams and microphones. Staff will engage webcams and microphones to make presentations and respond to the members of the Commission. For members of the public who are in attendance and wish to provide public comment, after the chair calls for public comment on the item you wish to speak on, please engage the raised hand feature. I will then have the ability to open your microphone and you can provide your public comment to the Complete Streets Commission. If you do not have a working microphone, please type your comments into the chat feature and the staff will read it out loud. That concludes the instructions and I will return the meeting back to the chair.
All right, well, thank you very much. And now we are moving on to reports and announcements. So under reports and announcements, do we have minutes? Or do we not have minutes?
Regular agenda item.
Okay, great. So under reports and announcements, the staff and commission members may communicate general information of interest regarding matters within the jurisdiction of the commission. No commission discussion or action can occur on any of the presented items. Will there be any reports and announcements from staff?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Just a few items I would like to inform the commission on. So first, the City Council had made a couple decisions regarding the Santa Cruz Avenue closure. The first one is the closure of the travel lanes and dedicating them for local business. Second is involving the review time in terms of the parklets. The City Council will be reviewing them around Labor Day or so. For the road closures, the City Council will be reviewing that in February of next year. And for everyone's benefit, just to remind the Commission that the closures are currently on the south side of Santa Cruz, from Doyle Street to Curtis, and then from Crane to Evelyn. Also, last night the City Council approved the recommended speed limit citywide that the Commission had heard about in the previous meetings. In addition to what was approved at the time, there were also several directions that were given by the City Council. The first one was to come back with a scope for traffic calming measures on Middle Avenue from Olive to University with the goal of slowing down traffic. Also to change Olive and O'Brien to 25 miles per hour, to change Choco Street to 30 miles per hour, and then also on a citywide effort to expand the school zone to the extent possible by the letter of the law. So those were just two projects that would be of interest to the Commission. Also want to just briefly make an announcement that the City Council also appointed a new EQC Commissioner, the Environmental Quality Commission. The new commissioner's name is Leah Elkins. So for anyone that might have crossed paths with Leah, certainly would welcome her to the Commission world. And with that, I will conclude my reports and announcements. Thank you.
I have a question, Kevin. What was the first statement you said about the citywide speed limit and something about the recommendation that the Complete Streets Commission had made?
For the city council, in addition to approving the item as is, there were several additional feedback and direction that were given by the city council. So the first one that I mentioned was directing staff to go back to the city council with a scope for implementing and designing traffic calming measures on Middle Avenue.
Middle. Is there a time frame for when they want you to come back to council?
Not at this moment in time. There will be several assessments that we'll need to make because the item itself is currently not on the work plan list. So staff internally will have to go through and see what that would do to staff resources as well.
Okay.
So there'll be a bit of work internally that we'll need to do before we can go to the city council.
What I understood was that there are a couple of, I think, big wins for us. One was making Santa Cruz Avenue 25 miles an hour all the way out to Orange or whatever that is out there, the stop sign on the all the way out west from downtown, right?
Yep.
The whole 25 miles an hour, and then 25 miles an hour on Middle from University to El Camino Real. I think, right? That was the recommendation. Okay.
Hey, Kevin. Question, and you're muted, but maybe you won't be when you answer. I watched the meeting and I have thoughts, which is not appropriate necessarily to share all of, but I'm really curious. I realized afterward, when I was looking back into the numbers in the 2019 ET&S, that we didn't have comparison data. It would have been really interesting to see, not to create more work for staff, but to see how things had changed since 2012. And I wouldn't want to over extrapolate on causality, but for example, I was surprised and pleased actually by how low the actual driving speeds were on Santa Cruz Avenue. And I have a hypothesis that the bike lanes and sidewalks that are being really frequently used might be part of that recipe. And I don't know whether that speeds have always been like that. And so that's just how fast people drive on Santa Cruz, or whether there might be some other artifact or some other, indicator or some other variable, right? But I guess where I'm going with this is that when I hear about traffic calming on a street as major as Middle, I would love to see us explore whether or not we can use things that are useful to multiple users to do the same thing. So for example, if it were possible to create better bike and ped infrastructure that also had the effect of traffic calming, that would be super cool and more useful possibly than a speed bump or a planter, if that makes any sense. Just that was a thought that I had when I was hearing people talk last night. And I'd love to see, for example, if that's been effective on Santa Cruz Ave.
Mm-hmm. I would like to ask another follow-up question that is related to that as to what happened in the meeting. So did the city council also discuss the potential of bringing policy items relating to fees into the prioritization discussion for next year? Was that something? And obviously next year is a different year and city council is not, committed to doing what they talked about last night, but was there discussion about that at the meeting?
I'm sorry, would you mind repeating what was the topic of?
Yeah, so did the city council talk about potentially bringing back some of the broader policy questions about speeds and speed limits and how to achieve whatever the policy goals were? Did council talk about potentially bringing that into a goal setting discussion for 2021 for the next year?
Thank you for the clarification. So specifically regarding a comeback date, there weren't any detailed discussions. However, there was a general, at least I think a couple of the city council members expressed interest in exploring the 25 miles per hour CDY with some exceptions to major arterials that go through the city as a major connector. But so other than that, there was definitely a show of interest, but there was no discussion or as part of the motion, any specific returning dates.
Okay.
Mhm.
Thank
I
you
have-
for clarifying.
I have one final question. Kevin, you mentioned something about school zones, and the California Vehicle Code talks about 25-mile-an-hour in school zones and actually leading up to school zones. And I know that last night the council did not approve 25 miles an hour in all school zones. For example, Middle Avenue has a school, New Beginnings, and they approved a 30-mile-an-hour speed by that school zone. So what was the comment about school zone speeds?
Thank you, Commissioner Kirsch. So I think generally speaking, the city staff, we have at least the not the power, but we can look at some of the streets that are fronting school frontages and determine if a lower speed when children are present is warranted. So in this case, we have several schools out in the area where the frontage row of that school is lower to 25 miles per hour or even 15 miles per hour sometimes. So in this case, the direction that was given by the city council to staff is to really explore that area a little bit more and perhaps expanding that citywide. Now, what that means, I don't have a clear idea at this moment in time. My vision is that perhaps we'll be exploring most of the school frontages and see what kind of speed limit they are right now and kind of go from there. So that's kind of what I envision city staff will be doing with that direction.
Yeah, the last comment I want to make is that New Beginning school on Middle does not have any kind of barrier. And my understanding after reading the code is that the speed limit cannot exceed 25 miles an hour in that school zone. So the staff recommended 30. Mm-hmm. Council approved it. That would seem to be in violation of the California Vehicle Code.
Yeah, no, that's a really good feedback. I don't have that information at the time, so I'll make a note of that and go back and talk to our colleague offline.
Yeah, look at the vehicle code, because I didn't see any outs in that regard where you don't have a barrier, a physical barrier between the street and the school, which that school does not have. So I don't know how the staff can recommend 30 in that zone. To me, that's a violation of the vehicle code.
No, all right. So there seems to be a really robust interest in this topic, as well as a number of upcoming implementation steps in terms of what staff will be doing with the council direction. Will it be appropriate for staff to bring back to this body as an agenda item, and the chair and vice chair can raise this with staff as something that seems to be of interest to the commission based on observation here?
Thank you, Kevin.
Okay. So are there any other reports and announcements? If we're done with questions, we will move on to, let me check to see if there is any public comment relating to that. We will now move on to general public comment, where the public may address the Complete Streets Commission on any subject not listed on the agenda. Each speaker may address the commission once under public comment for a limit of 3 minutes. Please clearly state your name and address or political jurisdiction in which you live. The commission cannot act on items not listed on the agenda, and therefore the commission cannot respond to non-agenda items brought up under public comment other than to provide general information. Patrick, do we have any comment from members of the public? That looks like a yes.
Yes. Thank you, Chair Levin. If I could just reread this for anyone who might have joined after the beginning of the meeting. For any other members of the public who are in attendance and wish to provide public comment, just please engage the raise hand feature, and then I will have the ability to open your microphone. If you do not have a working microphone, just type your comment into the chat and we'll be able to read it out loud. And that being said, it does look like we have a public comment from Andy Russell. Hi, Andy, you are now the public speaker.
Good evening, and thank you everyone for this opportunity to speak to the Commission. My name is Andy Russell. I live on Cambridge Avenue in the Allied Arts neighborhood, and I'm joining today to ask the city to make my streets safer for kids and bicyclists and pedestrians. This is not my first time asking. In the past year and a half, I've submitted a petition with my neighbors' signatures, a written request to the Planning Commission. I've spoken in person at the Planning Commission. I've submitted a ticket to the Public Works app, and I've written about a dozen emails to various members of the city asking to make my streets safer by adding a speed bump and a bike lane. I live on a residential street with no sidewalks. There are cars parked intermittently on both sides of the road, so kids and pedestrians and bicyclists are constantly weaving in and out of the middle of the road, obscured by parked cars, because there's nowhere else for them to go. Our street is a major cut through for commuters and delivery vehicles because our intersection has a turning lane off El Camino. And thanks to Waze and Uber and Instacart and DoorDash and many other services, people are constantly speeding down our street. And in the next couple of years, it's only going to get busier because of the traffic increases due to the new buildings at 500 El Camino and the new commercial real estate in review for the corner of Cambridge Avenue and El Camino. Every time I ask the city for help, I hear crickets. Sometimes my emails go unanswered. The ticket I submitted was closed without response. A few months back, I was told by the city police department that they couldn't help me because there was no budget for patrolling for speeders. A few weeks ago, I was told by the Public Works Department that it was too expensive to install a speed bump and that there was no forum for me to request a bike lane because the city's neighborhood traffic management program had been suspended due to budget cuts. A few weeks back, my kids came about 10 feet away from being mowed down by a speeder as they rolled their scooters out of my driveway. I'm not exaggerating when I say that speeding cars are the #1 threat to my kids and my neighbors' safety in Menlo Park. Where are the city's priorities if not to mitigate the #1 threat to its citizens? Where are my tax dollars going if not to make relatively simple infrastructure improvements like road striping and speed bumps that will make our neighborhood dramatically safer? I've tried everything I can think of. Please tell me what I can do to be heard by my city government. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. And while we cannot engage in the specifics of any issue under general public comment, you can ask clarifying questions of staff. So first of all, is it the case that the full NTMP process is in fact suspended for budget reasons? And if that is the case, is there any existing process where citizens can report safety issues? What is the current process as a factual question for staff?
Thank you, Chair. So with regard to the NTMP program, we are currently accepting applications, but Mr. Russell and your statement of suspending the NTMP program for the time being is correct, and that's mostly due to staff resources. We want to make sure that all of the projects that we have going on are going at a reasonable pace, plus all of the upcoming projects that we have. So in terms of that statement, that is a correct statement. We have engaged Mr. Russell a little bit regarding to her request or his request, and we're currently looking into that. So given the subject matter and the fact that we can't have any further discussions, I'll leave it at that and be happy to talk with the commission chair offline.
Chair Levin, I just wanted to tell Andy that he should make this exact speech in front of the city council, because they're the ones that can direct resources to help you. And I think your appeal would be impactful in front of city council.
I'll also say that the next agenda item after we approve minutes is the transportation master plan. And if Andy, if you'd like to stick around a little bit or maybe just read it on your own time, that's going to come before council next month, I think. And that has citywide an updated bike and ped plan. And I think there's a very, very narrow window of opportunity in which anything might possibly be changed, and maybe it's even too late. But if nothing else, it could show you what kinds of things the city is currently thinking about for cyclists and pedestrians. So I would recommend checking that out. It's actually, there's a link from our agenda if you're looking at it.
Okay, a great basic information and recommendations regarding the city process. All right, thank you very much, and thank you for coming in and speaking. Okay, moving on to regular business. Under regular business, the commission considers recommendations of city staff on policy matters or administrative actions that require commission approval. And the first thing that we will do under E1 is approve the Complete Streets Commission regular meeting minutes of September 9th, 2020. Is there any comments or corrections on the minutes? Hearing none, do I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes?
I move to approve the minutes.
And second.
All right, can we have a roll call vote?
I don't know what a roll call vote is.
Staff will lead us in the roll call.
Okay.
No, thank you. Since I have you all on the picture, if you can just raise your hand and hold your hands up, and Commissioner Kurz will be abstaining because he was not at the meeting.
I raised my hand on the tool.
Got
I'll
it.
I'll lower my hand on the tool now. I raised my hand for real.
Thank you very much. We basically we have a eight yes vote, so motion passed.
Great. So now for the big agenda item of the evening, where the commission will provide feedback and recommend to City Council the approval of the draft transportation master plan, where Christiane Choi, the acting transportation manager, will introduce the item unless other staff will introduce the item. Staff will introduce the transportation master plan. Is anybody muted?
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Let's see. And can you, oops.
That looks like a screen.
Can you see the presentation or?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you. Yes. Good evening, Chair Levin and members of the Complete Streets Commission. I'm Christiane Choi, Acting Transportation Manager and Project Manager for the Transportation Master Plan. And I'm also joined tonight by Mark Spencer of WTrans, who is leading the consultant team working on the master plan. And so thank you for having me here tonight. As you know, we're currently in the midst of a pandemic, and this transportation master plan process started 3 years ago. So the transportation and economic conditions have changed since that time. However, we developed this plan to be a flexible and living document. So the plan has a framework in place so that it can change with the different needs and priorities of the community. So tonight's presentation, we're going to focus first on the project background and purpose, then present the plan to you, and then the next steps. So I know there's a few new commissioners since we've started the process. So just a little background on why we're doing the Transportation Master Plan. It started out from the general plan update that was approved in 2016. And it was the highest priority program that was listed in the circulation element. And the City Council has made it one of their top priorities in their work plans since 2018. The TMP is a citywide document, so it includes both large infrastructure projects as well as smaller projects. It will include updating our bicycle development plan and sidewalk master plan. And so that we have one transportation document that encompasses both the large infrastructure projects as well as some of the smaller ones. So in March of 2019, the City Council adopted these 4 goals as of the transportation master plan: so safety, sustainability, mobility choice, and congestion management. And all of these goals relate both to the policies of the circulation element as well as the climate action plan. So as I mentioned, we started this process 3 years ago in 2017 when WTrans was selected as the consultant team to help us with this process. And the City Council had also appointed an 11-member oversight and outreach committee to oversee the process. And then we first started out with just kind of gauging existing conditions, went out with out to the community to understand what are the issues, concerns from the community, and developed some draft recommendations. We had several meetings over 2018 and 2019 to get feedback on those draft recommendations. We met with both the Oversight and Outreach Committee as well as this commission. And in June of 2019, the council also approved the prioritization strategy of ranking the recommendations. This process also, the TNP also included updating our transportation impact fee ordinance. And so that was done in a parallel process. And so in 2019, late 2019, the City Council adopted the new traffic impact fee. And these are assessed on new developments to help fund some of these infrastructure projects. And then last fall, we had kind of our second engagement process. We got feedback from the community on the various TMP projects. And then since that time, we've been working with the consultant team to help develop the draft TMP document. And then last month, we met and presented the draft TMP to the Oversight and Outreach Committee. So just kind of an outline of the plan. This is just kind of most the labels of the chapters, the list of the goals, what the key issues were, kind of a summary of our community engagement, the discussion of the different recommendations and strategies, and then a prioritized list of the projects, the implementation plan. And then finally, we included appendices that were used to help support the plan. And so these next slides are kind of some screenshots of the document itself. And so this is just the cover and the table of contents. And then we tried to make it as visually appealing and easy to understand with a lot of graphics and tables. And so you can see that here. And then I also want to just kind of point out a couple of the appendices that are in the TMP. One is a transportation toolkit. These include some of the pedestrian, bicycle, signal type of treatments that are proposed in the plan. And so kind of include some information about it and some examples. And we also have a complete streets cross-sections example as well, and that's in another appendice. So as I mentioned, the City Council had approved the prioritization strategy in 2019, and hold on, I need to move my screen because I can't see everything, but. Yeah, so we originally started with over 190 projects and strategies. And so we grouped them by different categories. And we ended up with 4 categories: local, citywide, straightforward, and regional projects. And as you can see in this flow chart, the local and citywide projects are kind of prioritized in 2 tiers. Tier 1 and Tier 2, where the straightforward and regional projects are not prioritized. And this is primarily because the straightforward projects we consider to be something that we could easily implement, and that we would implement it as part of our capital improvement program. And then the regional projects, these are larger projects, regional in nature. The city would not lead those projects, especially most of them are in another jurisdiction's right of way, but we would be a stakeholder in those projects and help to move them forward. And I'm going to be going into a little bit more detail about the prioritization strategy, but first I'll just mention the regional projects. We had 5 regional projects, and these projects included the Bayfront Expressway Multimodal Corridor Project. This is one where we propose using the shoulders of Bayfront Expressway during the peak hours for transit vehicles. Then the Dumbarton Corridor Project, this is doing some grade separations on the Bayfront Expressway, and then adding a high occupancy vehicle toll lane, or it's also called an express lane, where carpool and transit vehicles could use that lane for free, but people who are single occupant vehicles would need to pay a fee if they wanted to use that lane. Then the Dumbarton Rail Corridor is activating the rail line over towards the East Bay. The Dumbarton Rail Corridor Trail is parallel to that Dumbarton Rail Corridor. That would be for pedestrian and bicycle improvements. And then the Caltrain crossing improvements is the grade separation projects at Ravenswood, Oak Grove, and Glenwood. So all the projects were, at least the local and citywide projects, were evaluated on these 7 criteria, including safety, congestion management, how the project might reduce greenhouse gases, transportation sustainability, whether there was a school located nearby, and if it was in a location with daycares or senior centers or communities of concern. And then lastly, if the project provided a way to incorporate green stormwater infrastructure. And so we have a kind of a visual scoring system where the full circle means that the project fully met the prioritization criteria. At the half one is partially met, and then if it's empty, then it didn't meet it at all. And so if the way we did it was the tier 1 projects are ones where the project met at least one of the criteria fully, and then if it was tier 2, then it had met criteria just partially. And so I just want to point out that means the tier 1 priorities are our higher priority projects. However, that doesn't mean that the tier 2 projects wouldn't be built until the tier 1, all of the tier 1 projects are built. Some of the tier 2 projects are what we call kind of opportunity projects, where we would take advantage of times when, like maybe a street's being paved and it makes sense to then implement that tier 2 project at that time. And so just here's kind of a summary of the list of the number of projects in each category. And you can see that the cost of all of these projects is quite a bit, in the hundreds of millions of dollars. And so we'll need to look at how we might fund those projects. And so we have kind of 3 buckets of money. One is to use local funds. Another is the traffic impact fee that I mentioned earlier. And then another is grants and taxes. And so all of these buckets help to fund the CIP, the capital improvement program of the city. And this kind of pie chart just shows kind of what the breakout of transportation and kind of the streets and sidewalks projects are for the current budget year. And so you could see that that's about 51% of the CIP budget. And that CIP budget is adopted annually by the city, by the city council. So we did meet with the Oversight and Outreach Committee last month. And so this is just kind of a summary of the feedback that we heard there. Some of it was pretty straightforward comments that we plan to include in the final TMP. Some such as the street classification map and the priority scoring were missing from the document, and so we plan to add those in. Another comment that we did hear about was the how new projects are added and how does the community see what that process is like. And so we're looking into some kind of tool that's either a map or a table that's web-based that can then show kind of the progress of the projects. And then also what the new projects that have been identified and how they're added in. Then a couple other of the comments were about the terms congestion reduction and congestion management and the consistency of using those terms. And so we're going to be reviewing the document and then presenting those changes to the council in November. And then another comment was about the coordination of regional projects, and staff does participate in multiple regional groups and committees. And so that would be one of the ways we would help to continue to advocate for these regional projects. And then lastly was integrating the transportation toolkit with the city standards. And that is something we plan to forward that recommendation to the city council. So the committee ultimately voted to recommend approval of the transportation master plan. They also had some other requests that the prioritization of the implementation be aligned with the climate action plan goals. And then they also had a couple of things about the Complete Streets Commission. They suggested that you would advise the city council on recommended projects as part of that climate action implementation. And then they expressed some reservations about the Dumbarton Corridor project that I mentioned earlier, especially regarding the impacts to access to the Bellhaven neighborhood. And then also mentioning that the Complete Streets Commission worked with staff about integrating the transportation toolkit into the city standards. And then I think this is actually a typo on the slide, so that last line shouldn't be there. So the next steps in our schedule is tonight we're getting your feedback on the draft TMP, and then we plan to outline all the changes based on the recommendations we hear from you guys tonight, as well as what we heard from the Oversight and Outreach Committee. And we plan to present that to the council on November 10th. And so finally, after the TMP is adopted, what happens next? So we plan to start implementing the straightforward projects that would be as part of the kind of CIP process. We expect that would take probably the next 5 years to do all of the straightforward projects. And then we would identify which tier 1 projects we should include in the 2021-22 CIP, and then also looking out for 5 years. we would continue to look for grant opportunities that would help fund these projects, and then also continue to process how new projects are added. So tonight, we're just requesting your feedback on the readability of the final plan. Does it, do you agree with that the layout and the graphics do make it easier to understand? Letting members of the community know that the plan is getting ready for adoption. If you have any comments on the funding and implementation strategy, and then a recommendation to City Council to adopt the plan. Then that concludes my presentation tonight. Happy to answer any questions. And again, as I mentioned, Mark Spencer from W-Times is also here tonight, and he's also available to answer questions. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you very much for this presentation. It's really been quite a road to get here, with a lot of work from staff and from the community. So from this presentation, are there any questions from commissioners at this point?
I have a question. Can I ask a question?
Yeah, please do. And also, please use the raise hand feature.
Sure.
There's a slide up, so I can't see everybody's face at the same time.
Got it. All right, I'm just talking, so I'm not going to raise my hand, but I'll do that next time.
You know, already acknowledged. So,
okay. So I'm curious, and I've looked through this many times, and I'm not sure which, forgive me if this is there and I just missed it. But I know we talked about, I think you're thinking about adding the street categories, like sort of street categorization, and then the map that shows, you know, this street is designated as a bicycle boulevard, this street is designated as a neighborhood collector, this is a neighborhood connector. I think you mentioned that just now in your presentation. What I'm really curious about that could be a really cool next level, and maybe it's not possible, is sort of the mapping of design standards to street categories. In other words, you know, I was looking at like a Gaithersburg, Maryland design standard, like safety standards, design standards thing. And I'm wondering if we've done something like that in the past, if it's an option in the future, and if this could be part of this of the TMP, or is that ship just sailed? Because that way you can kind of look up your street and then be like, oh, it's this kind of street, and this is what the design standards are for my street. That feels like it would be simpler for people maybe ultimately than looking through like a really long list of looking through 200 projects to find out where their street is and if anything's been planned for it. That's all. It's not, I'm sorry, that's sounding more like a suggestion, but it was actually a question because you mentioned it in your presentation that you were going to do something regarding standards.
So I think the recommendation from the committee was to integrate kind of like the toolkit with the city standards. We would kind of look at kind of making sure that they are aligned, but we wouldn't necessarily be calling out the specific street classifications in that standard document. The one thing I mentioned earlier in terms of the street classification map, we would put that in with the kind of complete streets example appendices that has kind of like the names of each street type, and then kind of an example of what the street cross section might look like. But I think some of it is harder to do. I mean, it will depend on kind of like the right of way of each street, what we could do. So it may not always be possible to do the same thing on every type of, say, for example, mixed use collector street.
Okay. Are there any other questions from commissioners? Let's see. I see a hand from Commissioner Lee.
Yeah, Christiane, could you go a little bit into the discrepancies or the dilemma between congestion management and whatever the other term was? Like, are you referring to the same thing throughout the TMP, or are there two different types of congestion, whatever you call it?
Yeah, I think so. The goal for congestion management and the language that's used there is kind of a long description. And so I think the committee had mentioned that there's, it's worded slightly different in certain parts, not necessarily all throughout, but I think we're just wanting to make sure that the language is consistently used. And so I think sometimes it says congestion reduction versus congestion management. So sometimes it's, I think for some of the readers on the committee, they felt it was hard to understand what was the difference. And so we wanted to just be consistent.
Right. So when we see those terms, we're meant to understand that those are specifically for car traffic, to expedite car traffic in some way. Like, we're not talking about, I mean, those are specifically for car traffic, correct?
So the goal includes kind of managing kind of congestion at the same time as prioritizing, different modes like walking and biking. So the goal itself includes both. It's not supposed to be just for vehicles.
All right. Thanks.
All right. Are there any other commissioner questions? I am not seeing any hands here. All right. Well, are there any, if there are no other questions from commissioners, we can open this up to questions from members of the public. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak to this item? Does staff need to make the announcement again, or are we good with the announcement?
Yes, Chair Levin, if you don't mind. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for anyone who might have joined us recently, if you're a member of the public and you're in attendance and you would wish to provide public comment, please just use the raised hand feature. I see that we have one already. We'll be able to open your microphone and you can provide public comment. If you do not have a working microphone, you're allowed to type your question or comment into the chat feature and we will be able to read it out loud. So going off of that, it does look like we have one public commenter. Hi, Bridget Roberts. You're now able to speak.
Hi, good evening, commissioners. Thank you. My name is Bridget Roberts, and I'm a Menlo Park resident and the new chair of Parents for Safe Routes. I sent an email yesterday to all of the Complete Streets commissioners to recommend City Council include, include 3 amendments to the TMP prior to its adoption. Number 1, perform walk audits at schools. Number 2, adopt citywide safety standards for pedestrians and bicyclists. And number 3, hire full-time safe routes coordinators for Menlo Park with an appropriate budget for a robust program offering bike and pedestrian education. I would love to hear the Commission's thoughts and reactions to my proposal. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And let's see, are there any other members of the public who wish to speak on this item? I am not seeing any hands, so if you do wish to speak, please return to your computer and raise your hand, or we will bring this back to the commission for discussion. And I would like to ask staff some clarifying questions with regard to the questions from the member of the public. And so would the items that were just mentioned in terms of walk audits safety standards and safe routes coordinators, would they be things that were in the plan itself? And if so, how do they map to things in the plan, or would they be things in an implementation of the plan? I'm not saying like, should they be done or not? I'm saying like, where would they fit?
Okay, sure. I think that the perform walk audits could be something that could be included in the performance metrics. The safety standards is something that I'd have to think about that one a little bit, about where it would fit in the TMP. With respect to the Safe Routes to School coordinator, I think that would probably not be something to include in the TMP. It would be a different process. So I think in terms of safety standards, I think it depends on what's included in that. We definitely have the Vision Zero goal in the circulation element of reducing or eliminating traffic fatalities and reducing kind of the severity of the crashes by 2040. And so we do have that goal, and that's kind of a citywide goal. It's not necessarily, I guess, for a specific street, so to speak, but that is already one of the goals in the Transportation Master Plan.
And then safe routes coordinators, where in the city's plans and processes does that fall? Would that fall in the TMP, or would it fall someplace else in what the city might choose to do?
So I think that it wouldn't necessarily be part of the TMP. It would be kind of a separate, we do have a Safe Routes to School program that the city runs today. So I think that it would probably be kind of advocating for that to continue in the future.
Okay.
Sorry, through the chair. So Nikki Nagaya, Public Works Director for the city. So appreciate the suggestions and how to incorporate them into the document. I just wanted to mention for the, in relationship to hiring staff, the TMP does not provide an outline for how to add staff to the city teams going forward. So that would be something that's done through the budget process that the council adopts each year. So I think that's probably the right place for those discussions to happen.
Okay, and I have one more clarifying question with regard to where the member of the public's comment would be addressed. And since safety standards apply to the Vision Zero policy and its implementation, how does the Vision Zero policy get reported on? If one wanted something relating to that Vision Zero policy, where would one direct those comments?
So I'm not sure if I'm understanding your question correctly, but one of the performance metrics out of the TMP is to kind of report out on collisions over time. And so that would be something that would be done.
Okay, thank you very much. And I do see that there's another member of the public with a hand raised, and we'll use discretion to call on the member of the public, Ken Kirschner. Can Ken speak? I am not hearing Ken or anybody else. I don't think I'm muted.
Can you hear me
Okay.
now?
Yes.
Okay, my question regarding the TMP is whether it has been updated to incorporate vehicle miles traveled as a new metric, because the state has adopted that as the metric and essentially dropped congestion as a comparative metric. This is part of the CEQA Act.
Thank you very much. And let me turn, before we come back to the commission, want to go back to staff for a clarification. So staff, where does VMT fit in the metrics that the city uses, and where do other metrics play in what the city uses? Can staff clarify that?
Yeah, so so the VMT is part of kind of like the prioritization criteria on the person throughput and the greenhouse gas reduction criteria items. So it's related there. We do not have kind of a performance metric identified that calls out vehicle miles traveled, but that is something that we can consider and look at what would be appropriate to report on going forward.
Okay, thank you very much. So bringing it back to commissioners again, and I see a hand from Commissioner Abruzzi.
So I've looked through this document pretty extensively, and actually, honestly, was kind of blown away. I think it's a great plan. I love this plan. I'm very excited about it. I think you framed a lot of the topics in a really wonderful way. And so it made me hopeful. But it is fun or interesting sometimes to do like a search, right? So I did just search for vehicle miles traveled, and that just showed up once. And I searched for Vision Zero, and that showed up 3 times, and one of those was in a comment from the public. And I think that it's fair to say that if we have these programs that we had adopted as a city, that I actually know, because I've been working with Nikki long enough that, and Christiane, that you guys are thinking about these things a lot, and that for you, these are things that you care about, and that thinking about these topics goes into the work that you do. But I think we almost have like a weird public relations challenge where I think if you asked most citizens, they wouldn't necessarily know we have a Vision Zero program, that we adopted it, or what it means to have adopted it, or why. And so when we're reporting on things like collisions or improvements, I think like tracking them back to that program and that goal would be so helpful for people to understand. That this, especially, the big conversation we were having last night about potentially lowering speed limits around the city to mostly 25, or like right sizing roads so that was comfortable for people. Getting back to these original goals of like VMT reduction for climate change purposes and Vision Zero, just sort of collision reductions, right? Seems really important. And so making those connections when you're reporting on them. And I think that would be like a really powerful thing to add. That was one point I wanted to make. Another is, so Bridget had a couple of requests, and some of them to me seemed a little micro scale for the context of this particular document. But I did notice, so another word that I searched for was the word programs. And because originally when I was looking at the TMP, like in its earlier phase, I was really thinking of it as a set of projects. And I kind of missed the programs aspect. But we do have some programs included in the TMP. We have like some transportation demand management stuff. The neighborhood traffic management program is mentioned. And I think in that context, I think it's worth asking whether or not putting something like the existence of a city-based Safe Routes to School program, without getting into the details of what exactly that program does or how many staff it has, that seems to fit. I mean, you had even like, you were kind of costing it out, where you were looking at like, this, it's 50,000 for this kind of, for the NTMP or something like that. And I would love to see Safe Routes to School. Again, you may be planning on doing it anyway, but I'd love to see it elevated at that rate, because it's not just engineering. It's also just this coordination role that Andriana's been playing. And all of the other kinds of things that families and citizens want to see, like better bike education and that sort of thing. So to me, that also feels like something that, even though we're at like the 11th and a half hour, and it may be too late because the OOC has already spoken, I'd love to see that sort of integrated a little bit more. And then I will stop there because I know other people want to speak, but those were my big talking points.
All right. Great. Are there any other commissioners who would like to make comments? I am hearing a lot of quiet. People thinking really hard. Have we gotten a chance to? Go ahead. Yes, Commissioner Kirsch.
The problem with the Vision Zero adoption is that it's almost meaningless because it's 20 years out, and it sort of gives the city room to wait 19 years and then do something. There's no intermediate steps to get there. It's this far off vision with no near-term goals to get us there. That's just my comment about Vision Zero. To me, it has no teeth. It needs some intermediate goals to get us to the vision at the end.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? Before we may wind up with motions, if we have been through this enough that we're starting to feel good with the addition of maybe some of our comments. Going once, going twice, I would like to make a motion. Can staff put up the OOC recommendations? Because some of them had reinforced Complete Streets recommendations beforehand. So if we reinforce the things we reinforced before, I don't know whether that causes any like warp of the time and space continuum. But anyway, so readability of the final plan, getting the word out about the plan to the community, funding and implementation strategy, and a recommendation to the city council. So not hearing any overall complaints, the motion will include positively recommending to the city council with a couple of recommendations. Let me see if I can digest what has come from the members of the public that has been reinforced and added to by the commission, which is that as part of the readability and communication, what I'm hearing is that there are some really important programmatic and policy elements that we have about transportation, like Vision Zero, that we're providing, and like since this is supposed to be a living document, including those things and updating them with incremental progress on the goals, where we have some kind of a goal and a metric. Like with Vision Zero, we have a metric about collisions and injuries. Okay, when this is updated, can it have a section on this important safety policy, and what are those metrics? Because even though these things live someplace else in the city, I think it's perfectly reasonable for a member of the public, since this is such a good summary, people want that summary to be comprehensive about, well, what's the city doing here? So I think that if staff thinks that that is a reasonable idea, then that is a proposal to have in the motion, to have a section about tracking the metrics relating to the policies and programs covered by this plan. Also, the question was asked about vehicle miles traveled. And on the climate, it was GHG is mentioned as a metric for prioritization, and that is excellent and good and tracks the climate action plan, but also is kind of abstract in comparison to what people's lived reality is. So in people's lived reality, 70 to 80% of their GHG and VMT come from, in terms of people's understanding of their transportation, it's easier to understand driving miles than it is to understand greenhouse gas emissions. Like, you don't think about how many pounds of carbon you emit in the course of a trip. So maybe having reporting in VMT terms also, because I think that would be helpful as part of tracking those metrics, and including a section in the city's policies and programs, so that if somebody is thinking, wow, what a great comprehensive document, where's the Safe Routes to School program, it can list it. So did staff catch that, or do I need to summarize that? I think I said 3 things. And one was having a section that is reporting on incremental progress on implementation and key metrics. Another one was having a section on the program, so someone who thinks that this is a reference material can find basic reference information. And lastly, and a smaller point, is reporting using the VMT metric, which is easier, more intuitive for people to understand.
Dina, was that a motion?
Yeah, that was a motion to recommend affirmatively to City Council with the following 3 things.
Okay. I second.
All right, hang on for just a quick second. Can staff change to the slide of the OOC recommendations? Okay, do we want to, so I would also propose reinforcing the things that we had recommended that the OOC reinforced, which is that we request the prioritization of the implementation to be aligned with the city's climate action plan goals, and recommend that recommend that we, the Complete Streets Commission, advise the City Council on recommended projects as part of the CAP recommendation, and ask for and ask to be able to work with staff to integrate the transportation toolkit into the city standards. So including into our motion the things that we recommended to OOC that they included in their recommendations. With that, basically restating things that we've said before at least once, will Commissioner Kirsch second that?
I'll second that.
Okay. Any comments from the commission? I see Commissioner Lee.
Yes. Can you hear me, Adina?
Yep.
All right. Are we sure that we know what we're asking for all these things? Like, I'm not exactly, when we say recommend that we want to advise City Council on recommended projects, what are we asking for exactly there?
So my understanding of what this means is that in every, so at least for every year as for the city's priorities and the capital improvement plan, there are projects. And the way that the TMP is set up, there are a great many projects in tier 1 and tier 2. So just saying something is priority 1 doesn't really say very much about when it will be done. And so we are asking City Council to ask us to recommend to them projects that would help implement the climate action plan by reducing vehicle miles traveled.
Okay.
And since it is our job to advise council on things relating to our mission, this seems like a recommendation that is advice to the City Council on relating to our mission. You know, obviously City Council decides, we only recommend.
Right. So maybe if we could make that a little more explicit and say, you know, when it comes time to look at the CIP, we would like to have some say in what transportation projects, you know, or not say, but be able to recommend transportation projects that would help the climate action plan goals, something to that effect? Or do you think it's not necessary to be so explicit? I just, it's a little bit amorphous, I guess, right now for me.
Okay, well, I may ask for staff help, but we'll ask for staff help with a clarifying question in there. First of all, just as is, if staff would read that bullet point 3, does that imply, you know, as part of a regular planning process? You know, do we need to spell out how we recommend projects?
Oops. So I think that if there's a process that you would like to implement, then or how you would envision this would kind of come to you, maybe as Commissioner Lee suggested, as we review the CIP every year, or some other fashion. It would be good to know what the Commission's feedback is on that.
Okay. And I have an opinion on this, for which I would like to hear from others and also from staff, which is that as part of the CIP process is baseline, that is the normal way that it would make sense for it to happen. But in addition, with the current unusual budget year, where the city is approving its budget in increments, and you know, when the city approved the budget for the current year, the City Council said we are drawing somewhat on reserves, and we may choose to use, and we are freezing a number of staff positions in transportation as a budget saving measure. And they said we may choose later in the year, in the fiscal year, to dip further into reserves in order to pay for things that help, in order to pay for things that are for priorities that are not yet fleshed out at the time that we approve the budget. And they explicitly mention the climate action plan as something that was not yet done and approved by them when they approved the budget. So as a second item, in addition to the normal recommendation as part of the CIP process, I would first ask staff for how sensible it is, and then recommend that we may do a special climate emergency and COVID emergency process to see if there are things that may make sense to accelerate as part of the multiple budget year.
So I think it's going to depend on, in terms of like what the timing is for that kind of mid-year budget item. I'm not sure how much time we would have to, and also depending on the adoption of when the TMP actually gets adopted. So there may not be enough time to come back to the Complete Streets Commission. It's hard for me to say that because I don't know the timing of kind of both.
Yeah, and I think, so I can add a little bit of background and then hopefully respond to Chair Levin's question. Through the about 25 budget hearings we had in the city adoption process this year, there were a lot of moving pieces. And so one of the places the council looked for savings in order to balance our budget was for vacant positions. And we had 3 vacant positions within the transportation division that they decided not to fill in order to see then the savings from those salaries in the year ahead. So I think they've had a couple of additional meetings since they adopted their budget at the end of June, talking about how they want to move forward, what their goals and priorities are, and then what types of additional service enhancements they want to add back into the budget reductions that they had adopted at the end of June. And where we are right now is getting closer to bringing forward a proposal in order to advance some of the requests that we've heard from them, but they haven't adopted yet their full list of priorities. So I think while we're tracking where we bring back an additional request for resources, I think that will happen later this fall. And as Christiane was saying, we don't know that the commission would meet again prior to the council providing some direction on how to move forward. So that's a little bit of background on the budget and where we are with the resource requests. But the way I had interpreted the bullet point about the Complete Streets Commission advising the council about the climate action plan implementation is that this was also a recommendation of the EQC and an item that was adopted in the climate action plan. So I think it was described there. I thought that this point, as the committee discussed it, was providing additional support and additional validation for that request that's itemized in the CAP. But if I'm understanding that incorrectly, feel free to correct me, please.
Okay, yeah, that if it's clear to staff, then I think it's probably clear enough. And would the normal, am I understanding right that in a normal budget year, that would feed into the CIP?
Well, I think the CAP adoption came with prioritization of a number of the strategies that were recommended in the climate action plan. This was not a strategy that the council prioritized for action this year. And so I think that's where we had identified it in a future cycle. What I thought the Oversight and Outreach Committee was asking was to do it sooner. And so, okay, so that I'm following your thinking, I believe. And then.
Yeah. Okay, so the way I would phrase this, and correct me if it's like technically wrong or impossible, like it is obviously the will of the council as to whether they choose to accept the recommendation or not. But the way that I would phrase this would be to advise the city council on recommended projects as part of the CAP implementation, generally as part of the capital planning process, and then specifically, if it is the will of the council, to move forward with the VMT reducing projects as soon as possible.
That is clear to me. I think you can look to your fellow commissioners to make sure that everybody's on the same page. But I think that I'm following what you are describing.
Okay. because like city council didn't say do the VMT things when they approved the climate action plan, but they also didn't have the TMP before them. And so with the TMP before them, it is not hard to imagine saying, oh, wow, here's some, here's a couple of projects that could, notably reduce VMT, allow us to recommend to you council, here are some things to accelerate. Okay. So if that makes sense to staff and doesn't sound like unreasonable, the council can choose to take or leave our recommendations, but if it is an understandable and sensible, if debatable thing to recommend, then that is the answer. Commissioner Lee, has that answered your question and clarified what bullet point number 3 means on the page?
Yeah, I was just thinking that if the council does take our recommendation, then maybe the next step, thinking ahead, the next step would be to have the Climate Action Plan Subcommittee. I don't know if that still exists, but that Climate Action Plan Subcommittee to work with EQC on creating that short list of VMT reducing projects that rise to the top of the list. Saying these are the ones that are really obvious to us, and and submit them to staff as like a next step. Does that sound like what might happen?
I think that is very close. I think that if council approved that, we would need to look at our committee structure and determine if our committee structure had exactly the right people to do that job. And we would refine our committee structure if we were charged with doing that, or consider refining it, yeah.
Right, or do it all together or something. Like maybe it's not a subcommittee, maybe it's the whole group, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let's see. Motion, second, clarification made. Any other questions or comments on this motion before we call for a vote? Not seeing any hands. All right. If there are no other comments here, can staff help with a vote on this motion?
Chair, so if I may ask Christiane to just share the screen. There you go. Okay, so now I see everyone. Okay, so raise of hand if you voting yes for the motion. Thus far, I'm seeing a unanimous vote, so the motion passed. Thank you.
All right. Well,
really great work, Christiane and team. But like seriously, that I know you guys have been short-staffed, and that there are all these different moving parts, and it's been an impressive effort.
Thank you.
Thanks to Christiane and staff and consultants, and also to this commission, where like a lot of the ideas that we put forward have gone into this thing. So yay all. Moving back to the agenda. We are now looking, the next item on the agenda is E3, which is a recommendation to the City Council to approve the Complete Streets Commission work plan for 2020 and 2021. And can staff present this item to the Commission?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just a brief introduction to the item. Tonight, we're asking the Commission to provide feedback and ultimately, hopefully, recommend the approval of the work plan to the City Council. So I have prepared a few slides just for conversational purposes. I am going to go ahead and share my screen with you. I'm just going to go ahead and make this a full size.
Not seeing anything, boss.
There we go. Let's see.
Now we're seeing it.
Okay. Awesome. Let me see if I can go full screen without changing too much of my screen. Okay. Can you guys see a full screen, or are you guys seeing something else?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Full
perfect.
screen, sir.
Awesome.
Yep.
Thank you very much. So like I say, staff has prepared a few slides. Just briefly go over them. The slide that you're looking at right now contains the priority and work plan projects that the City Council will or has approved and will approve for the year 2020 to 2021. The projects that have been approved are numbers 1 through 5, which are the priority projects. Numbers 6 through 17 are the work plan projects, and those are to be discussed and approved at a later date as of today. I do want to just briefly mention that number 17 is a new item since the last time this has come to the commission. It's a Menlo Park Safe Bay project. It's a grant opportunity to really look at sea level rise. So something I think the EQC probably will be very interested in. And for those that are interested in the climate, that's probably one to follow as well. Now back to our commission. This next slide that you guys are in front of you is a summary of the 2020 and 2021 work plan. So as many of you know, at the last meeting, the commission designated 3 commissioners to work on the draft. So this is essentially the content that was developed by those commissioners. As part of your staff report, the full text is attached as attachment A for your reference. And if anybody is interested in looking at the approved 2019 and 2020 commission work plan, I do have that available for reference as well. So with that being said, staff tonight is looking for the commission's recommendation to approve the 2020-2021 commission work plan. And with that, I will pass the baton back to the chair for the discussions.
All right. So this is a summary of what the subcommittee worked on and reported. Do any commissioners have any comments, questions, suggested refinements, entire overhauls, or does this look perfect? I am not seeing any hands at all.
I believe
no,
Commissioner
excellent.
Lee.
All right. Yeah, so I see Commissioner Lee.
I just realized that there's like no mention of COVID whatsoever on this, and I'm feeling like we're being left out of the fun. No, I think this is a good reflection of where we are and what we can expect to be working on in the near future. And obviously, if something comes up, it doesn't mean that we can't work on it as well, right?
Absolutely. I think with regard to the work plan itself, you know, one of the fundamental aspect of the work plan is to support the city council's work plan. But certainly that doesn't preclude the commission from exploring other interests and other areas that the commission wants to explore. We just need to make sure that it goes through the proper channel. That's all.
Okay. Great. And Commissioner Brucey.
Yeah, really quickly, Kevin, I'm super tired tonight, so I may have missed this, but when does this work plan kick in?
Well, if it wasn't for COVID, probably May of this year, but the next step for this work plan, if it gets the blessing from the commission tonight, is to go to the city council in November for the final adoption.
Okay, so the thing that I'm curious about is ensuring that we're not going to miss the vote on council's sort of rapid request last night about Middle and Olive, because I know the streets are due for repaving, at least segments of them are, I think. And I know that Councilmember Mueller had requested, as we discussed earlier in this meeting, traffic calming on Middle and Olive. And I don't know what your timeline is for addressing those concerns, but I just want to make sure, and I'm sure you're thinking about this, that we're synchronized. But I'm wondering how that affects this work plan, or if we need to fine tune that particular item.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think with regard to the City Council's direction to explore traffic calming measures for Middle Avenue, that's certainly a direction that was given by the City Council. I think that could be, it really kind of falls under item number 3, even though item number 3 specifically focuses on Middle Avenue, the ped and bike trail crossing. There was a mention of Middle Avenue. So, and I think from a timeline standpoint, staff is still going to be doing the entire process of scoping it out. And so we'll take this as a note, and we'll just make sure that any coordination with the commission in the future will be properly scheduled and addressed.
Along those same lines, maybe you're already planning on doing this, but I realized it's been a while since we've heard an update on what the status is of that project of repaving. Because I know there were resident requests for different things, and there was a project that came to us, and I don't remember where that landed. I feel like I talked to Nikki about it right before COVID, but maybe we could hear about that too in updates at some point.
Yeah, definitely. Are you referring to the Middle Avenue bike lane project, right? Great. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm certainly happy to provide a brief update. So the last time that this item went to the City Council, there was a series of direction given to staff, but it was more holistically looking at the entire corridor, Middle Avenue. And since then, I believe you're right that there was a petition that was signed by residents that live live between Olive and Summertail. And at that time, there was a little bit of a back and forth between staff and those residents, and that was prior to the petition being signed. Fast forward to at this moment in time, because the item prior to last night was not on the City Council work plan, it wasn't something that city staff had planned to advance forward. Now, with that being said, last night definitely changed the narrative of that statement, and that's where I think we would want to allow staff some more time to explore what that truly means from a scoping and resource impact standpoint.
And are those streets segments still slated to be repaved?
So Middle Avenue from Olive to Summertail is still slated to be repaved. The last set of direction that was given was that we would put back the existing striping. However, we would use paint in case there's changing direction, etc., which is kind of last night kind of showcased that a little bit. Of course, that's all up in the air at this point. But the last, so I would say probably stay tuned at this moment until I have a chance to look into it a little bit further.
Okay, thanks. Mm-hmm. Sorry.
No, thank you.
All right. Yeah, and given this and the council direction, having this come to us seems like a thing that would happen, assuming that council approves the work plan. And in terms of other commissioners, I saw some furtive hands from Commissioners Seabrian and Wyatt, but I am not seeing those hands anymore. So have your questions been answered, or have you thought otherwise in terms of commenting? I am not seeing those hands raised anymore. Let's see. If you have any more thoughts, continue to think. I want to go to the members of the public. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak on the Commission's proposed work plan for the remainder of FY 2020-2021? I'm not seeing any hands from members of the public. Bringing it back to the commission and not seeing any more comments here.
Adina, I have a comment.
Okay, go ahead.
The work plan item that says number 4, downtown access programs support city council initiatives. I don't know what those downtown access programs are. And so I don't know what we would be supporting. With COVID now, we have this whole new structure to the downtown. And so are we supporting sort of the review and ongoing streamlining of the current makeup of the downtown street or something else? I just think number 4, either we remove it or we fine tune it to the reality of today.
So the way that I was reading it is that this would apply to the circumstances of today, where it would be within our purview to comment on the mobility aspect of the downtown reconfigurations and reconfigurations.
Okay. Okay.
Right. So are there any other hands on this? I see Commissioner Seaborn has a hand.
Yeah. So if I just to understand the downtown access program question better, does that also fit into one of the things that we had talked about with the TMP, where we would look at sort of projects that were connected? And so is the downtown access, like, is that a thing where we'd be looking at how different residents are getting to and from downtown from their disparate parts of town? Like, is it that kind of thing? Or am I missing that? Sorry, I'm not my sharpest self today.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what the item initially was, though, wasn't it, Chair Levin? Initially, it was, how can we get people downtown more safely?
Yes, and now that we have this, COVID reconfiguration and reconfiguration of downtown, this is, I think, the primary meaning is relating to that. But also, since we have a climate action plan and vehicle miles traveled goal, and the main and a sign of a project that would help reduce vehicle miles traveled is something that connects to destinations, and downtown is obviously a destination that people would wish to get to, and many people probably take short trips to get to. Then making VMT reducing recommendations in line with climate action plan to get to downtown would support both items 1 and item 4.
Okay, it's just a very broad item. I mean, for example, the undercrossing can be considered a downtown access project. And also that would potentially reduce vehicle miles traveled. So that really number 4 encompasses basically everything we're trying to do in the city.
I think if there was for example, if we were trying to, prioritize projects help council prioritize projects that reduced vehicle miles traveled, and we would observe that people who live in apartments on Haven Avenue cannot get right now to their closest supermarket safely without driving in a car. And we would want to prioritize projects that would help with that. That has really very little to do with downtown. So I think, downtown is such a common destination that there are multiple things that would pertain to it, but there certainly are plenty of things in the city that don't.
Okay, noted. Thank you.
any other comments? And if there are not, does anyone have a motion?
I move to approve the recommended commission work plan as laid out for us in the slide 2.
I'll second it. Katie, Adina.
All right, motion by Kirsch, second by Baruzzi. Any comments on this motion? Any hands from commissioners who have comments or wish to discuss this motion? I'm not seeing any. Maybe this motion is thoroughly self-evident. Can staff help with the vote?
Yes, thank you. So at this time, I would like, for those commissioners that would like to vote yes to the aforementioned motion, please raise your hand. So I can see, okay, the only person I'm not seeing is Commissioner Meyer, but, oh, there it is. Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you.
Okay, very exciting. We have a work plan for the remainder of the year that we are proposing to council. Very exciting. So now that we have gone through that, the next piece of our agenda item is section F, informational items, which are transmitted to the commission in staff's provide an update on matters of importance to the commission. Information items are not action items. However, the commission, city staff member, or a member of the public may request to make a comment or ask a question on any of the informational items. The first and only of which is F1, update on major project status. Will staff present us with updates on any updates on major project status?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of things I wanted to bring to the commission's attention. So first and foremost, in the past meeting, I had mentioned that staff would want to come to the commission in November for the Transportation Management Association feasibility study. That unfortunately will have to be postponed to December due to scheduling conflicts. I also just wanted to briefly mention that as I mentioned at the last meeting, I had applied 2 separate grants for the Middle Avenue Ped and Bike Rail Crossing project. One was the TA Measure A grant, and then the other one was the ATP Cycle 5. Just wanted to let the commission know that we're expecting to know the results for the Measure A grant, hopefully by end of the year, and then the ATP grant early next year. So those, if we were successful, the money would go towards the Middle Avenue Ped and Bike Rail project. So fingers crossed that we are successful. Finally, just wanted to briefly mention that our next commission meeting in November, unfortunately, there's a holiday conflict. So I sent out a doodle poll and the results came back that we'll have our meeting on November 12th. So that's essentially the Thursday, the day after our regular scheduled meeting. It'll also be at 7 p.m. So definitely want to bring that to your attention. So with that, I will conclude my major project status update.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions or comments on that from commissioners? Okay, I'm not seeing any.
I see a hand from Commissioner Kirsch.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry,
Great.
I should have activated a little hand. Kevin, can you, thank you for the updates. Can you update us on a couple of projects, the Laurel Ravenswood intersection project?
Right. Yeah, that one is scheduled to go to the city council in, I believe it's later this month or early next month. So once the agenda of that item is published, I'll certainly make sure to share that with the commission. But it's, well, we're anticipating to go to the city council soon.
Are you going with a final plan?
There will be definitely some recommendation to the final design. It wouldn't be a final plan in the sense of a construction plan, but there'll definitely be design recommendations associated with that.
Okay, so you're going to go to city council to get approval for the recommendations on a design scope?
Yeah, exactly.
Is there anything that should our commission see anything relative to the design?
For Laurel and Ravenswood?
Yes.
So the item did come to the commission, I believe earlier this year. No, not earlier this year, but this year. And we did receive some valuable feedback from the commission, and those will be incorporated into the final recommendation.
Okay.
Yeah. What I would recommend is once the agenda is published, and of course I'll be sharing that with the commission, is for the commission, for those that are interested, to take a look at that staff report, and then if there's additional comments that anyone would like to provide, they could either attend the city council meeting or write in per the usual way of providing comments.
Okay, and then one more question. Is there work being done or design work being done on the Alma Ravenswood intersection and the crossing that'll be part of the big new 1300 development there on El Camino?
So Alma and Ravenswood, not at this moment in time. There's no project. Are there anything specific that you're looking for?
Well, I thought there was going to be some work around that whole intersection there because of the big new project 1300 El Camino, and getting folks that live there or work there safely to the train station on foot. And I thought the city was going to be looking at enhanced crosswalks or other features to make that a safer crossing from the 1300 El Camino project across, what is that, Oak Grove? I'm sorry, I didn't mean Alma Ravenswood. I meant Alma Oak Grove. Is it Alma Oak Grove I'm thinking about, or is it Glenwood? Where the 1300 El Camino project is.
Okay, gotcha. Let me see.
Sorry about that.
No worries. Let me just make sure that I got the correct location first. It's
I think it's Oak Grove, Alma.
Okay. Oak Grove and Alma.
And Oak Grove and the 1300 El Camino Real project.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. So there will be an improvement of an RFB for one of the existing crosswalks, and that particular improvement is associated with that project. So not sure if that's exactly what you're referring to, but that is the project that I'm aware of in terms of a pedestrian crossing safety improvement.
Okay. Finally, sorry. I also thank you for that. I also had on my list Alma and Ravenswood. Is there any further movement on that project?
So Alma and Ravenswood, we recently upgraded the in-pavement flashing for the crossing. So this will be the crosswalk that's crossing Ravenswood at Alma. It's been the crosswalk has been, it was accompanied by in-pavement lighting, which is an older system and not as well yield. It doesn't have as good of a yield rate. So we recently upgraded that system to the rectangular rapid flashing beacon, which studies have shown to have a higher yield rate. So with that, we have upgraded that particular crosswalk's enhancement system recently.
Is there, final thing on that. So that's, I think, one of the busiest crossings in the city, you know, from the library across Ravenswood there at Alma. And there had been some discussion about removing one of the two westbound travel lanes so that we can make room for a contiguous bike lane. And also there could be room for a refuge for pedestrians crossing at that intersection. Is there any more discussion about making that a safer crossing?
Okay.
Other than what you just described?
Yeah. No, thank you for that description. That's really helpful. Let me check that offline, and then if Commissioner Kirsch, let me check that first, and then I'll follow up with you or maybe the commission offline.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Any other commissioner questions on this item? I am not seeing any hands, and I think Commissioner Meyer was just scratching his head. So we are moving on in the agenda. Okay, also any members of the public with questions on this? I'm not seeing any. All right, so moving on to subcommittee reports. Do we have updates on any of our various and sundry subcommittees? For example, starting with G1, does Commissioner Kirsch have an update from the Active Transportation Network subcommittee? Yeah, are there any updates on that?
I think Patrice has joined our subcommittee, so there's Patrice and I are now the subcommittee members. I think our interest right now is to see what the staff comes back with on Middle Avenue traffic calming, and see if we can move forward with making that Middle a safer street all the way from Olive down to El Camino, and doing that now, and then also in anticipation of having an undercrossing. If we can have really good approaches to that undercrossing, we'll have a very impactful outcome with the undercrossing.
You're
So
here.
if I can jump in here real quick, just for more of a formality than anything else, in order for a commissioner to join a subcommittee, we do have to agendize it. So I understand there's an interest for Commissioner Espinoza to join the Active Transportation Network subcommittee, and if that's the case, I can go ahead and agendize it at the next meeting, just so that it can be formalized.
I didn't mean to
No,
that, but I vote to have
just for the record.
Patrice join.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Commissioner Baruzzi, did you have a comment on the Active Transportation Subcommittee item?
I do. I wanted to let the Active Transportation Subcommittee know that CCAG, which is the county government, is updating their bike and ped plan. It's for San Mateo County. And a lot of Menlo Park is sort of integrated with these county areas, these unincorporated areas. Like Coleman has an unincorporated section, and a lot of areas up in like University Heights are unincorporated. So they're gonna have a workshop before our next meeting. And it seems like the kind of thing that Active Transportation Network Subcommittee might wanna be part of, because they're gonna be rolling out bike and ped plans for, you know, streets in our neighborhood. So I can forward you the email, or I can forward it to Kevin and have him send it to the whole commission. But that seems like something important to like stay on top of.
Thank you, Katie. Yes, I'd like to see that link.
Okay.
All right, fantastic. And Commissioner Lee has a comment on this item.
Yeah, I saw that email too, Katie, and I was confused because the County of San Mateo has just released its draft active transportation plan for unincorporated San Mateo County. So that is out and is floating around, and it's like 180 pages and has all these maps in it, and it just literally came out like, I don't know, maybe end of last week. So I'm happy to send that to Kevin as well. There is like, it shows what the plan is for like North Fair Oaks and Coleman and all these other things, and there's some controversy about that. So yeah, it would be good to get everybody who is interested to weigh in on that.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I remember seeing that. I think my sense was that this was like an opportunity for feedback, because they were talking about how we got to the new plan. And so I think that's what this is, but maybe it's something different. Kevin, actually, I'm sure you talk with these people. Can you clarify? Because it is a little confusing. Or do you know? I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah, I am aware of the CCAP plan. In fact, I just got a similar email not that long ago, earlier today. So I was planning on sharing the information with the commission after tonight's meeting. I didn't want to bombard you with emails before the meeting. With that being said, I think maybe at this point it's better for both Commissioner Baruzzi and Commissioner Lee to send what you were going to send me, and then I can kind of digest that information and send out a quick summary email just so that everyone's on the same page.
That would be awesome. Thanks.
All right. Excellent. Any other comments in addition to those helpful and informative ones? If not, so for the Climate Action Plan subcommittee, since the last meeting, there was action at the TMP OOC that was then ratified here to have the climate action be prioritized by this commission as part of our priorities and as part of the TMP. So, you know, we all lived through that in this meeting. Were there any other updates from any other members of the subcommittee? Hearing none. On the downtown access and parking subcommittee did not meet. Are there any updates on that topic that members of the subcommittee may wish to share at this time? Right, not hearing anything here either. And not seeing any hands raised. Okay. I'm trying to move the windows around on my screen. And moving on to the multimodal subcommittee, where one thing that I will observe that folks here probably know is that there is a measure on the ballot. It's called Measure RR, and it's a 1/8% sales tax that would provide dedicated funding from Caltrain that would prevent it from being shut down and would improve service in the future and would fund equity and affordability programs that were just approved by the Caltrain board and the future service improvements that the Caltrain board approved in their business plan. For anybody who is interested in this, there is copious information available about Measure RR, which is highly relevant to transportation in Menlo Park. Any other comments from members of this subcommittee? Moving on to G5, update from the Safe Routes to School Program Subcommittee.
Right, so I can, the city's Safe Routes to School Coordinator is hoping to generate interest around November 18th, which is Ruby Bridges Day. And Ruby Bridges was a young Black girl who desegregated, was the first to desegregate her a white school. And so it has become an event, and it was celebrated last year by some schools, was very popular. And so this year, I think by the time November 18th comes around, there may be a lot of kids who are actually walking to school at that point. So it could be a really great event to do socially distanced, et cetera. So if you are in touch with anyone at your school and would like to volunteer, advocate in some way, I'm sure the city's Safe Routes to School Coordinator would be happy to have you be involved.
Will information about any programs be presented to the commission through staff?
I don't know. Staff? Did you get that email about Ruby Bridges Day?
I did not get that particular email. I am aware of the event that you're mentioning. I can check with Nick to see if there's anything planned for that particular one. I do recall it being a fairly popular event last year, though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know of any what formal things that the city itself is planning to do, but I know that Anne Andreanne has been reaching out to the different schools right now to just sort of say, hey, you know, we're planning to do something and it'd be nice to get involved.
Okay, so when there are things happening, it would be great to share them through staff, through the commission for people who would want to. I think there's a first step, which is, do you want to help make the things happen, which is, I think, what's going on now. And then once the things are happening, then sharing the things that are happening with commissioners who may wish to attend or celebrate in some way would be welcome.
Noted, yes, thank you.
All right, cool. Anything else from or about the Safe Routes to School subcommittee? I am not seeing any. So now for the G6 Transportation Master Plan Subcommittee, I think we have lived through that in this agenda item. Does anybody have anything else to say on this topic in this meeting? I am not seeing any hands. Having exhausted this topic. Now moving on to G7, update from the Zero Emission Subcommittee. Any updates from our Zero Emission Subcommittee members?
No update.
I'm hearing. Okay. Does the governor's executive order relate to Menlo Park in any way?
To phase out gasoline by 2035. Is that what you're talking? Gasoline car sales? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, insofar as Menlo Park's in California, yeah.
All right. Thank you. All right. Any other questions or comments on, if there's no other questions or comments or hands from members of the public on our subcommittee report, then we can move on to meeting adjournment, where this meeting is adjourned. It says Chair Levin to adjourn the meeting and announce time. So this meeting is adjourned until the special time that staff had mentioned earlier in this meeting that I am not remembering off the top of my head.
No, we can adjourn the meeting now.
Right, but it says announce. What does announced time mean in here?
Just what time it is. It's 9:05.
Oh,
yeah. It's okay. I'm
the
making a
meeting.
note of it. It's
Good work.
It's a quick
Adina.
meeting today. Yes.
Thank you. Very nice.
Sorry.
Oh,
Yep.
it's 9:05. Yay! Thank you.
Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.